It's really God. And what does your mind know about God anyway? Your mind only knows what you've been taught. Your mind only knows what you think. Your mind does not know what your heart feels. So you have a choice today. Are you going to listen to your mind that only knows about God, or are you going to listen to your heart? You know there's a feeling you have when you hear something really wonderful that you would never say to yourself. There's a feeling you have when you hear that, and you know that's not the way you talk to yourself. Always preface your questions with the word God. Do not just ask a question and not preface it with the word God. And the reason being this, that if you can talk yourself out of it being God, you will. Your mind does not wish for you to go to a place where it is not in charge. So you have to let go and let God. If you preface your question with the word God or the word you use for God, unless you have somebody else's voice floating around in your head, or unless you tend to answer questions that are for other people, it will be God who answers. And how do you know if it's God or not? As I've said before, if what is said to you is different than the critical messages we give to ourselves, and sometimes we can be really mean to ourselves, very critical. You didn't do this right, or you should have done it this way. Or so-and-so is doing it this way, how come you're not? All those things are of the egoic mind, comparing, trying to be better than this one and that one. God's not about any of that. God simply is. So, the theme of the afternoon is about proving it isn't so. In other words, since this is a journey of inverse, science asks us to prove it is so. Well, science is here. Faith asks us, prove it isn't. Do you see the difference? In other words, you believe it is because you have faith. It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. Now that was said so very long ago. That was written so very long ago. And that's how it is supposed to be. We are supposed to be following God's voice, and not the voice of our own wills or our own minds. This is the voice we are to follow, the voice of God. Now, you all know that the world is so very different than that you struggle up against other people's wills all the time. Remember the inverse. To let go. To let God give you and show you the way. We were asked a long time ago to listen to God, and we speak to Him, but why don't we listen? It's a really important question. Why don't we listen? Lily Tomlin said something really great. Why is it when we talk to God, we are said to be praying, but when God talks to us, we're schizophrenic? it's true. Anybody who says, well, I heard God, immediately, as Bishop Hanson says, their antenna go up. And you go, okay, what planet does this person live on? Don't you? Well, guess who's deciding all that? It's not your heart that's making that decision. You're thinking your way through it. And believe me, if it was up to your mind, you would never hear God. You would follow it to the day you die. And some people do. And they lie on their deathbed. What's important to them isn't anymore what they did and how many degrees they had and how many things they produced and how many special awards they got. It's who loves me? Who have I loved in my life? Have I given them anything of meaning and purpose? Do I have meaning and purpose? Do I know God? Because that's where I'm going. That's what matters. And that's not of this at all. That's of who we are. That's of that union that we spoke of this morning. That's what's important on the day we die. And it's a sin. It's almost a sin for many people to finally determine that then, when they had all these years to be with that, and to nurture that, and to grow that union with God. You're all here for a reason. It's all come to this. This is what you are to do. It's socially acceptable to pray. We have these rules, this conditioning that I spoke of earlier. It's socially acceptable to pray. But it's not socially acceptable to hear God's voice. In other words, we're allowed to have the emptiness and place our words into it. But boy, if you should put something in that emptiness or create something in that emptiness, then we're crazy. Well, that's what God does in emptiness. He creates. And in the world, when He created the world, He began with nothing. Emptiness. That's why I've asked you to create the space today. You know, when I was lying in my bed during those 17 years, actually something incredible was going on inside me. And I had a lot of space when I wasn't thinking. And I was drawing during that time, and some of you know this story. I was drawing pictures of what I thought were designs. And it was only maybe a year ago when I pulled those drawings out of the garage. And they were labeled 1990. And I looked at one. And it was of a church. And I thought I was making designs of buildings. And it was of a church. It had crosses everywhere. Steeples. Things that a Jewish girl would never be drawing in her bed. I was later to become Catholic. And I didn't even know. He was working inside me. He was teaching me all this. He was showing me the way. And I thought that was wasted downtime. I thought I was wasting my lifeline there. Just like a butterfly when it's stuck in the cocoon for so long. And meanwhile, God is turning it into some beautiful creature. It's not doing anything. He's doing it. So, we don't want to hear God's voice. Not here, we don't. It's not socially acceptable. So why isn't it socially acceptable? I mean, where did that come from? Why is it not acceptable socially to hear God? What's that about? It's about fear. It's all about fear. Our minds want to stay in control. They fear being out of control. Some fear those who hear God's voice because they think they are out of control. I know somebody who saw me and I told them that I heard God's voice, and they said that to me. You are out of control. Well, we're all out of control. That's a given. Minds want to stay in charge, and to do so, they lie to us through fear. The only fear that's really real is when you come face to face with a danger, like a mountain lion. When you come face to face with a bear, like I have. You know that feeling. Your heart beats like you wouldn't believe. That's all you hear. You don't hear any voice. You just run. That's a real fear. That's a fear to keep you protected. But a fear to keep you away from God, that's just the story your mind creates. A perception. Something you think about God. And it's not real. Minds can lie and create illusions. Illusions that keep us from our relationship with God. And we have several of these illusions going on up here. An illusion is something that we think is true, we think that is not. It's a lie we listen to. Illusion 1. Our mind can keep things under control. Is that ever a lie? Just what Colorado Springs experienced in the past several weeks tells us. We couldn't control any of that. No matter how we tried, it was real, and we couldn't control it. But we listened to our mind telling us we should be able to do that, no matter what it says. Again, the mind wants to be in control because it doesn't want to be useless. It has become overactive. It has wonderful, wonderful tasks to do. It's a wondrous gift from God, but it is trying to dabble in an area that it doesn't belong, and that's God. Our minds aren't in control. Something else is, and you all know who that is. Because our minds fear loss of control, they divert us outside our hearts, keeping us from this relationship. Your heart just wants you to search inside. So we constantly come up with ways on the outside to keep us going away from the inside. Well, when you realize that God is in control, and that is a given, that is not a lie. It frees you in a certain way to try to have to control. You realize it's all up to Him. And unless you don't trust that, you'll feel freer. If you don't trust that, you won't. The egoic mind that makes the search endless and complex outside of us has you searching outside yourself. Because it gets a sense of self from searching. It gets a sense of self from adding more from the outside. That's more layers between us and God. more for the mind person to deal with, more to revolve around and around and around, to keep you burdened and off-center, away from your heart. Have you been doing this all your life? Or did you do this today? Illusion number 2. The will of God will take me somewhere I don't want to go. That's the number one concern of every student I see. Uh-oh, I don't want to go where he's taken me. I want to go where I want to go. Because I don't want to change what I always did and stop getting what I always got. If you always do what you always did, you always get what you always got. But yes, you do want to change it because you want to get better. You want to get more than you always got. You want to go deeper with God. Yes, you do. It's your mind that limits you. And it tells you that God's will is going to take you someplace you don't want to go. How do you know that? How do you know that here? When you've never done this before? You don't. What if God takes me somewhere that I've always wished to go? The journey of inverse. The mind will limit you, and with God all things are possible. All things, because it's we, remember? It's we. It's not me. It's we. And when it's me, I feel lonely. And then when it's we, I have solitude. It's we. When we become aware that God is in control, once we realize that God has a will of God's own, we sense God's power, wondering, what's going to happen in my will? Maybe I want to do things a certain way. If you look through the map of your life, you'll notice, and sometime in the journey you develop this thing I call overview, where you can see the map of where your life has led you. You will notice that when you follow your own will, it almost always self-corrects to God's will. Sometimes it's hard when that happens. Sometimes we consider that adversity. But it's only because we're veering off a path. And he's saying, wait! Wait! You gotta go this way! And you're not listening. You're going your way. Your mind fears loss of its own will. Because then it feels powerless. Well, you're not powerful from your mind. Not really. You're powerful as we. And that's power. It's heart power. That's not manipulative. It's not unkind. It's not greedy. It's with all the seeds of your spirit that we spoke about this morning. Kindness, love, generosity, gratitude, hope, compassion, joy, peace. No wonder your mind's afraid. You might not need it anymore for that. Fears are no more than a state of mind. Fears are no more than a lie your mind creates. I know they're very real, but they're a perception of the truth. They are not the truth. We talked about this at our last retreat, and many of you were here. So do you fear losing your will to God? Do you fear that? I bet you every single person in this room does. At some point or another. That's where determination leads us. It leads us to a place where my will there's nothing wrong with determination when it comes to things of the mind. But when it comes to God, the heart is where we want it to come from. Illusion number 3. You must be fearful of the unknown. Isn't that the truth? When you see darkness anywhere, you wonder what evil lurks there. I see darkness. What could it be? The mind says the unknown is where bad things happen. That's how it limits us. False emotion appearing real. That's fear. And fear, when it comes to God, you can't have God and fear in the same sentence. Although I just did. Fear, when it comes to God, cancels out the experience of God. Because you won't experience God if you're too afraid. They can't coexist. God is of heart, fear is of mind. And it's kind of like an optical illusion. You're looking at, you either see one side or the other. You can't see the whole optical illusion at once. Your mind and your heart can't process that way. They come from a different place. God is elusive to the thinking mind. You can think about God, but you will not feel and experience God in your mind. Because fear is based in the mind, fear grows in the darkness or the unknown. It festers there. And it does fester. You guys know how your fears fester. Where it's limited by what you have seen, heard, and read. And don't we have a lot of that because we turn on the news? We get that. A lot of stuff there. We pick up the newspaper, we get tons of stuff there. We turn on the radio, some more things to be afraid of there. And pretty much your fear encyclopedia grows that big. Oh, I saw somebody poison somebody with this. Maybe someone's trying to do that to me. I mean, we come up with the most far out things because we see them and then we take them and keep them and store them and associate with them later on. It limits the unknown to infinite bad possibilities. The mind limits the unknown. But the heart sees infinite good possibilities. A field to run free. And you can look at a field to run free and maybe some trees in the background with some shade and think, I'll just run that far because I don't know what's back there. That's the way you think. That's to keep you out of danger. The mind is trying to keep you safe. But with God, you don't need to be safe. You can't be safer. Does listening to God make you fearful of the unknown? You wonder what God has in store for you? Is He going to punish you for everything you've done wrong? See how the mind goes? Remembering that God is gentle and kind and good and loving and compassionate and joyful and peaceful. Gentle, generous. The more you see your fears about God as lies, the less you feel them. And the clearer what they conceal becomes. And they no longer block the way of truth. In other words, this is a layer that's covering between you and God. If you're too afraid of God, then you can't have God happy. You can't surrender. For me, I surrendered because everything had happened to me. There was nothing I had to lose. That kind of surrender is much easier than the one I'm asking you to have today, when you have a choice, when you may have a good life. And you have to choose to let go or some of that because it's meaningless to you. To choose a life with God that's more meaningful. Illusion number 4, God is complex. And I can't tell you how many people I've heard this from. The mind says, God is too busy. He's got too much to do. Too busy to talk to me. This God is infinite. This God created the intricacies of what we are and who we are and everything around us. Aren't we giving Him our humanness to determine what He can and can't deal with? Aren't we playing God with God? Err to the side of faith. Prove it isn't so. Could God actually be so awesome that He can actually speak to every single one of us and actually listen to us? The real faith is saying, yeah. And if you don't believe what I say, hey, you've got a great question to ask Him. And you're going to have time to do it. Our minds are telling us that God is too busy. Pay attention to me. But the heart says otherwise. God always takes the simplest way. God is within the simple. The simple is, hey, He created all of this. He must have a contact point with all of us. You could keep on going with that and make it complicated. But if we have life, and that's of Him, why not have communication? We let our minds lead us away from God, making Him complex. They tell us what God is and what He isn't and what He can't be. Our minds know nothing about this. Our minds tell us that what God thinks, and that He thinks like we do. Well, God is more than human. The mind knows nothing about the experience. God is felt within the heart. And I know I've said this a lot of times, but it takes a while for it to trickle through all the boundaries we put up. So does your mind tell you that God is way too complex to talk to you? He's got better things to do? If that's at all part of what you think, be aware of it. Wake up to it. Ruby says, reason is the shadow cast on God. God is the sun. I think he speaks to that optical illusion. We're looking in one place, and we're not finding him because we need to look in the other. So you're dealing with 4 basic illusions, and they are the mind's illusions. They hold tight so the mind can stay in control. But your mind does not know God, and you don't want to journey through your mind with God. You want to journey through your heart. An illusion is a lie that the mind creates to make us fearful and to stay in control. The mind is limited due to this and tries to place limitations on the infinite. Well, for all of you who need to know, you can't limit limitless. You can't control what can't be controlled. So the 4 illusions, again reviewed, are your mind has control. No, it does not. It has control of it. That's about as far as it goes. God will take you somewhere you don't want to go. And the answer to that is, what if God takes you somewhere that you've always wanted to go? Number 3, You must be fearful of the unknown, because evil lives there. What is in the unknown are infinite good possibilities. And finally, God is complex. He's too complex to deal with me. That's just a mind-made sentence. If God can create you, and God can create all, what's more? He is able to hear you. So you may have heard God speak to you this morning, and you may not have. Okay? You can be in the light of God with a beautiful gift, a way to understand your life, a way to be led to where you've always wished to go, not where you wanted to go. There's a difference between a want and a wish. A want is something you get from outside you. A wish is something that's felt within your heart. You can go where you've always wished to go and be guided towards your destiny, or you can withdraw again into fear. And hopefully, my presenting to you this afternoon will give you some awareness about that. Are you withdrawing into fear? Do you believe who you heard is God? Remember this. When people choose to withdraw from a fire, the fire continues to give warmth, but they grow cold. When people choose to withdraw from light, the light continues to be bright in itself, but they are in darkness. This is also the case when people withdraw from God. St. Augustine said that. Beautiful word. If you walk away from the voice that you hear today, you're withdrawing. He's still there. When we lose God, it's not God who's lost. God is always there. One of the things he said to me when I stood on the bridge, I've been speaking, but they don't listen. For after all, put it as we may to ourselves, we are all of us, from a birth to death, guests at a table which we did not spread. The sun, the earth, love, friends, our very breath are parts of the banquet. Shall we think of the day as a chance to come nearer our host and find out something of him who has fed us so long? It's like we have this hope that we know nothing about. Isn't it time we ask? Would you rather trust a limited mind than trust your Creator, the Infinite? Will you continue to have your ego lie to you so it can remain in control? Control that isn't even real? There's 4 things that we do, and I can't seem to locate who came up with these 4 deviations from natural mind. I researched and researched, and it just came to me one day. It was sent to me by somebody, and I can't find that, so please excuse me for not quoting anyone. But it's called the 4 deviations from natural mind, and I believe they were written for God. It's so close, we overlook it. It seems too good to be true, so we can't believe it. It's so profound, we cannot fathom it. And it's not outside ourselves, so we can't obtain it anew. And these things are true when you hear God's voice. So, if any of you are questioning who you heard this morning, or question who you may hear this afternoon, yourself if it's just too unbelievable to your mind, which limits you to have faith in it. Instead of endlessly trying to prove that it's God, you hear, because you cannot prove it. God is infinite. There will be infinitely more questions. Prove it isn't so. Err to the side of faith. For those who believe, no proof is necessary. For those who don't believe, no proof is possible. So if you feel as if you will not be able to believe that it's God, it's your mind talking. And so I tell you, keep on asking and you will receive what you ask for. Keep on seeking and you will find. Keep on knocking and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives. Everyone who seeks finds. And to everyone who knocks, the door is open. Today we are knocking. This is what you call the knock. It all has come to this. Knock hard. Knock on that door. Don't give up. There may be too much noise on your side of the door to hear what's on the other side. Keep on knocking. Don't step away. All happenings, great and small, are parables by which God speaks. The art of life is to get the message. There are messages everywhere you go from God. I know some of you have heard this story before, but I was sitting one day in the church garden, Broadmoor Community Church Garden, and watching the ants cross the sidewalk. And one of the ants had a beautiful beetle that it was dragging home, what I thought for dinner. And it dragged it and dragged it and dragged it. And when it got to the other side of the concrete, to the grass, it let go of the beetle, and the beetle walked away. I thought the ant was having it for dinner. I was totally surprised to see it walk away. And I asked God, tell me about that. Why did that beetle walk away? And he said, not only humans have compassion for animals. The beetle was afraid of the concrete. Now, again, you can think I'm schizophrenic if you want. But my heart knew that was the truth. So, we're going to talk a little bit about your practice. Because from here on in, you're going to start your day a new way, a new beginning. And you're going to wake up early, just a little bit earlier than you're used to. And you're going to empty into your journal and create space for God. And then you're going to anchor in God's world through presence. You're going to see the present moment, and you're going to be aware of the beauty of it. And then you're going to ask God questions. You're going to listen for His voice. So that you start your day in His world. And you bring the beauty, compassion, love, kindness, peace, generosity, gratitude to our world. And make this world a better place. Instead of bringing your grief and greed and worries to God's world. And just speaking to Him of your angst. You start the day this way every day for 40 days, and you will begin to see a change in your life. You will begin to see a change in you. And people will say to you, this is not the reason to do it, but people will say to you, I want what you have. I want your peace. I want your love. I want your generosity. I want you will be changed. It's not a promise, but try it and see.